Well, good morning. Happy Monday after Father's Day. Welcome to another episode of Unpublic with Citizen Stewart. Today I have the great joy of having somebody who's for real about our children and about the educational progress of our kids, and definitely about parent power. The power of parents. I've said it a million times over the last couple of years. Parents don't need to be empowered. Parents need to be in power. Those are two different things. Telling somebody that you want to be empowered means you've got something and you're giving it to them. Mm-hmm. Telling the system that you want parents to be in power, that's a totally different scenario. So today we have Bernita Bradley from the great city of Detroit, who's been a parent activist going back many years, is a parent activist in both sense, activates for parents and with parents, but activates as a parent with her own child. Those are two different ways to show up to the work. So appreciate you for being on this morning, Bernita. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Chris. And by the way, happy post-Father's Day.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, all last week, I was trying to get some visibility to Black fathers, right? Because all across the country, Black men are, like I said last night on our show, today's Monday morning, millions of Black men are waking up, going to work, are going to do things that they know are going to be hard and tough so that they can feed babies, and they're invisible. They're invisible to the mainstream press and media, and we need to stop that. Today, I wanted to talk about something along the same lines, though, Black power and Black parent power and Black, brown, and beige power, like anybody who is marginalized out of power. One way in which we have seen over the pandemic of the last year and a half that people have been reclaiming their power and taking it back is through homeschooling. Mm-hmm. Homeschooling traditionally was seen as something that was for the religious right, maybe something that white folks did who had either resources or some sort of religion or some sort of purpose for wanting to keep their kids aside. We never really thought about over a long period of time that the numbers of Black families, for instance, was growing in terms of homeschooling. In the last year, it seems like it has grown a lot. I think I heard like 300 to 500% growth just in the last year. And you decided to do it. And I think for a lot of people, it sounds good, Bernita. I think it sounds good. But I want to know from you the reality of homeschooling. So tell me some of the basics. Why did you decide to do it? And is it everything you thought it would be? And did you have some of the same fears and that everybody else would have, like going into taking your kid out of school and being the first teacher? Tell me more about it.
So let me backtrack just a little bit, Chris. Historically, Black people have always homeschooled. Homeschooling happened back in the early 1800s when Black people weren't allowed into those same schools and those same systems, right? We had no other choice to. And we found a way to make sure that our children read, even if it was in the midnight hour, even if it was behind closed doors so that other people didn't know that they could read. But Black people have been taking education into their own hands. Once education they started seeing Black children as more funding from states, then they start pushing us into their schools, right? Then they started saying, you need to come and join us. And this is the only way that your child's really going to be successful and really going to thrive, right? Like, because you guys can't do it. And so Black people, started buying into it, right? And then the system that says that you have to have a college degree, you have to have all these rules. And so Black people went along with it. But even in the midst of that, there was Black people who saw the disparity and said, nope, I'll homeschool my own child. Even if they were traveling 10 miles away to get to school and they decided, nope, my child's not going to keep doing this. If you can't make it more accommodating in my own city, I'm going to make sure that my child is educated in my home. So it's been happening. Yeah. You're muted, Chris.
There we go. Sorry about that. We have always been, in one way or another, having to take matters into our own hands, whether it was building our own schools in our community when the state wouldn't build them for us, when they gave us the raggedy schools, putting our best teachers in them to teach separate from everybody else, and teaching under trees, teaching in church basements, teaching in social clubs and everything. So that's a good point to draw out. But now, Bernita,
Yeah.
so
Your original point.
I'll say, like, that's a good history lesson. But, as a parent with 3 kids upstairs or whatnot, it's attractive to know that you can pull your kids out because you're sick and tired of how they're being treated or what they're being told in school, or just little attitudes that teachers might get with your kids when you interact with them. And you're kind of like, if you get that attitude when you talk to me about my child one more time, right? You have that sense, but at the same time, the idea of taking them out and being full-time in charge, especially if you have a job or you work or whatnot, it's a little bit of a fear. I mean, did you have any fear when you were approaching it?
I did. So my daughter asked me in 5th grade. I didn't start homeschooling until last year when she was in 11th grade due to the pandemic. But she asked me in 5th grade. And my first impulse was, I do not want to be your enemy. Like, I do not want to sit behind the desk with you all day talking about, get it done, do this, do that, right? Because I know my daughter's my child, right? And I literally used to give my daughter to teachers on the first day and say, look, if you let her run your class, she will. So I'm going to need you not to let her run your class, right? And that's not in a negative annotation. That's in the annotation of my daughter is she looks like she got to protect everybody in the classroom, even from the teachers, right? And so she asked me to homeschool her in 5th grade. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not doing this. I'm working all day long. But I didn't have the full understanding of what homeschooling was. Everybody I had ever seen homeschool, they were like the stay-at-home mom, the baking mom who bakes bread from scratch all day mom. And I just was not that mom, right? I want to be somewhere educating, advocating, and all this other stuff, right? But anyway, last year, my daughter, like most kids, she had no interactions with her teachers from March to mid-May. They kept sending emails full of lessons and, Google Classroom full of messages, Microsoft Teams, whatever they were on. And the school literally had no synchronized learning whatsoever for all the teachers. Like, they were like, oh, well, if this teacher decides to use Zoom, they can. If this teacher decides to use Microsoft Teams, this teacher, and her school was all over the place. And now, mind you, she's not even going to one of the general public schools in our city. She's going to more or less an artsy school, right? And at first I was trying to be graceful, but after about a month, I'm like, yeah, this is some bull. I know I'm about to get in y'all butt. What about these other kids, right? And so the kids were creating these little groups, these learning pods themselves. My daughter had a pod of 15 kids on a group chat, and they would get on Skype and Zoom and help one another with work. And
they did that on their own?
They did that on their own, right?
Wow.
And my daughter's in 11th grade. It's 11th graders on here, 9th graders, 12th graders. And they like, hey, what did you do for science? What did you do for, and they're making learning themselves happen. But at the same time, my daughter, who is a genuine lover of learning and love educators, like my daughter is that kid who, and I hate to be long-winded, but I got to kind of explain this.
Tell the story. Yeah.
Every holiday goes to school with stuff for teachers. You see these kindergartners like, Miss So-and-so, I made this for you. My daughter is in the 11th grade, like, Miss So-and-so, happy Valentine's Day. I heard you say you like Skittles, so I got you a heart full of Skittles, right? Or I made you this craft and here's Skittles all over it, right? Like, intentionally, this is my daughter loving on teachers. But it seems like every level of her life, she had some disappointment in the pandemic. When in May, she told me, yeah, my school's going to be like this next year, I'm dropping out. I could just go get my GED and I can go to nail school later. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. This is not going to happen, right? Yeah. Now, all this while I'm still advocating for families on the side who's being marginalized. And I'm pushing on the school system. And we're pushing on the school system saying, why don't these babies have tablets yet? Why don't this? Like, I can afford my daughter a tablet. I can afford my daughter all these things. But what about these other families who can't afford it? And even if they can't afford it, you're their school system. And we're watching 4 blocks from our house, the richest community in Michigan, Grosse Pointe, their kids are getting it. Their kids are going home with the tools they needed. They were in the midst of learning. The state was like, oh, we may do a pass fail for all these other kids who just weren't getting it. No, they weren't not getting it. Y'all wasn't giving it.
Wow.
Like don't pass it off on them as a pass fail. And then who determines what this pass fail is? So you mean to tell me that teacher who sat on Zoom and yelled at that kid or emailed that mom and told him John didn't say goodbye yesterday when he logged off, and that's problematic on Zoom? Ma'am, it's a pandemic. What are you talking about? So because you didn't like that John didn't say bye, you could possibly give him a fail.
So let me ask you this. When you decide to homeschool after all of that, is it like a resignation that you don't think that the systems are going to get better, that you don't think that the money is going to come? I mean, like, listen, I don't understand Detroit 100%, to be very honest with you. So you're there. So I would need to know. But at this point, have you decided in all your life living there and watching it that help isn't coming, or they're not going to get the funding right? Or like, is that one of the reasons that you would homeschool?
Let me tell you, Chris, we done been on Lansing. Parents are the reason why Dr. Vitti has his job, our local superintendent. Parents went to Lansing and fought. Parents helped create coalitions between charter and public schools that will not play fair in our city. Parents came together and said, look, for the collective voice of our children, let's all do this to make sure our public school systems exist and that they keep thriving. Parents with the Lansing fought for our budget to be paid off. We had a deficit that would probably never have been paid off if our state didn't hear the voices of parents and these organizations saying, no, we have to pay this off so that public schools can exist. And yet that was in 2017, and a long journey, mind you. But yet in 2020, we just got a legal right in Detroit for a basic education to read and write.
At the state level, though, that came from the state level, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because you and I were just talking before we started today. Years ago, I heard about the parent network, the Detroit Parent Network, through some reports I got from Casey. And it sounded like ideal. I was like, we've got to, like, whatever they got going on in Detroit in terms of this parent network, we got to get one of these here in my state. And you and I were just talking about that. How far back do you remember that effort going? Like, when did you first engage in that effort?
I joined Detroit Parent Network in 2010.
2010. So that's 11 years ago. Have the issues changed in those 11 years?
No, they haven't.
They have not changed.
Our schools have been taken over by state. We've had state oversight where we had emergency management. They increased the deficit. We fought for those deficits to be paid back. We fought for those schools to be turned back over to public schools. We fought against for-profit, non-best actor charter schools. We've done it, the whole gamut of it, right? And all we keep getting, like we were told last year, is give us patience. Like we had schools literally coming.
That's the point I was trying to get you, patience.
Right? That's their favorite go-to. You want to play the violins and tell us how long it's going to take before. No, but we have a third grade reading law that states if our children are reading on grade level by third grade, they get constantly left behind. But there's no court anything that states how you're going to get them on track. All you want to tell us is give us time. And then during the pandemic, they literally were scalding parents like, how dare you not be with educators when they're going through this? Hell, none of us have been through a pandemic before. What do you mean?
And those educators, I just want to be very clear about this. Every time this comes up, I want to say, if you are a teacher in the United States, and this is no rip on teachers, but I don't think as parents, we do ourselves any service by reading somebody else's email. I'm not going to read teachers' email. I'm not a teacher. I'm a parent. I've got kids in my house that I'm trying to get across the finish line. If you are a teacher in the United States, that means you have been to college, because you have to go to college to be a teacher. So here you are, you got yours already, right? You done passed through the gate. And when I pay attention to where your kids go to school, your kids are never going to the worst performing schools in the district that you work in. I'm sorry, teachers. It's just real. You have a college education. I get all this, like, when you just said violins, I get that, it's a tough job. It's not easy. You really want to know what's a tough job? is not having an education in a country that's a capitalistic country with nothing to earn with. That's a tough job, right? Yeah. So you got all these babies coming through, and what you just told me was 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, is when you were working with the Detroit Parent Network and watching this. So if somebody was in kindergarten then, they're just about done now.
How about my daughter? How about my
right? Your daughter. And it hasn't, you're telling me in that time it hasn't changed, but the recipe from college educated people is just wait. Just have patience.
Just give us time. Matter of fact, you don't know how to educate your child. You don't know what it takes to do this on a daily basis. And I tell them, like I tell everybody, quit your day job if this is your only excuse. If your only excuse is that the pressure is so high and you don't get paid enough to do what you do, then guess what? Nobody asked you to take that job. Walmart is hiring.
She said Walmart.
Hiring, right? Like they're hiring like everybody else is hiring. Go work there somewhere if you have such an ought or such a disdain against working with our children. Like you said, most of the people don't even have children in the same school system. Our local superintendent, who was constantly telling people, give them time last year, sir, your children don't even go to the same district you lead. Right.
Wait, what? No, say that again. The superintendent's kids aren't in the district?
Thank you. Your children are not in the same district. You've paid for your children to go somewhere else, right?
And they're in private school?
Yes, sir. But you're telling me to give you time, right? You're telling me, and I understand I have teachers in my family, I have educators in I have friends who are like working that same system, and we go back and forth all day, right? Like last year I had somebody was like, Bernita, you need to reconsider this. No, I don't when my child's being sucked. No, I don't when I'm the one getting the call, or we're the ones getting the call of a parent who's on the phone crying because all they asked was for a tablet. And you're taking forever to get this broken tablet fixed for this child. But then the teacher's constantly prosecuting the child, right? And so fast forward, children were going through stuff and not just my child. I dare not ever advocate for something just for my child, right? In that moment, you think I'm sitting in that seat for my child, but I'm sitting in that seat for every child that comes through that school. Because what I change for my child, I'm changing the trajectory for every other child you'll impact, right? And so I start thinking like, okay, if I got this question in my head, how do we homeschool impactfully? You know, it's easier now that it's a pandemic, but how do we homeschool even after this is over with? I know other parents do. So parents were already closing off laptops. They just were making other plans to do it. And so I said, okay, come on, let's have some conversations. That's where it starts, right? Talking to the people that it's impacting. Let's have some conversations. Let's get some parents who have homeschooled on some live chats, and we were on StreamYard and everything like, hey, what do you do? What are you doing that's working? What are you doing? What are you doing? How can this mom do it? And I was sitting in the back kind of more quiet. Let you talk to this mom because this mom will have more questions. It's easy for me to just get a coach for myself, but I want you to have the tools you need. And from there, when Vela ended up doing the Meet the Moment grant and the opportunity came up, Carrie told us about it from National Parent Union, me being the Midwest Delegate for the National Parent Union, got to give a shout out to them. Carrie was like, we've been fighting all last year. Like, this is not right. And what are you going to do for families? What are you going to do? School systems. If you won't do it, we're going to do it. Right. And so I put in my plea, my proposal for it, and came back as coaches for parents. Right. Kids have a coach for everything under the sun. But parents needed a coach to know how to homeschool. And not that parents aren't empowered. Like, we have the tools, and those coaches, what I love the most is the coaches actually brought out the tools we already had within us. Like, what do you have in your toolbox that you need to utilize right now? What is your relationship with your child?
Yes.
What connectivity with your child? Don't just pull them out in homeschool, because you even have to have agreement with the child, right? This is a conversation with the child to have, because if that child doesn't want to homeschool, we had families that were split. We had families where 3 kids homeschooled and 1 kid was like, I'm good. I'm on Zoom every day with my friends and we kicking it. I'm good. Right. And then
That's
we
an
have
important lesson right there too, is just as a parent to know not everything is for everybody.
not for everybody, right?
Yeah,
And
don't
we
stick with something just because you think that is good. Don't just stick with a school because it's what you do. And
yeah,
don't make a jump like this. What you just said is true. I have 3 upstairs. I have one that, they all 3 had terrible remote learning situation last year. They hated it. They would have went anywhere and done anything else
but
but to do that. I
yeah,
mean, literally, it was a fight every day. But now that school might be opening up and back, at least 2 of them are more interested, I think, in that, and one of them is still interested, I think, in being homeschool, just not remote learning.
yeah, yeah.
And we got to be willing to do whatever. I mean, to switch it up. I do want to stop and give a shout out. So you mentioned Carrie. That's Carrie Rodriguez. For people listening and watching, Carrie Rodriguez is the elected parent of the National Parents Union. The National Parents Union, I think, is 2 years old now. Had their inaugural meeting in New Orleans a couple of years ago. It's 150 or more organizations nationally that are banded together through parent activists to have collective voice nationally, because everybody in education that has a collective voice has a vested interest in the exact same system that is in place right now. You have teachers unions, superintendents unions, school board associations, like 8 or 9 lobbying groups and interest groups that are interested in the system staying exactly the way that it is right now. What is so weird about that is schools don't exist without children, and children don't exist without parents, and parents don't have that same level of power nationally. So what you saw like last year, for instance, this is why I love the Parents Union. And I love the work that you're doing, Bernita, because it comes from grass up, butt up.
Yeah.
Like when I say grass up, I mean, yes, start with the grass and not the grassroots, actually the ground roots, which is something I heard recently, but up, because we had Biden, the president. We would see news reports that were like, well, he met with Randy Weingarten and they've decided everything for how school's going to be for millions of children nationally. And it's like, well, wait a second now, who's missing? Because last time I checked, Randy Weingarten isn't living in Detroit on the ground with kids going to schools that nobody else wants to go to. Yeah. So how was that meeting had? So to see you all interject yourself into that, to see you all come up with some solutions, real solutions on the ground, one of which I want to talk about right now. I wanted to go out, make sure my audience has a finer point on the National Parents Union and Carrie, the organization that you work with through with them. But when it came to providing direct resources to parents to help them do their own educational collaboratives, how did that work, and how is it working now?
Yeah. So different organizations decided to actually invest in those, like you say, ground up efforts, right? And say, what would you do if you could impact your children and children in your community? We wrote about it, right? Different people won those grants, and we've been doing the work constantly on a daily basis, making sure children have what they need to learn. I had a parent here, Stacy, who was just like livid. Like you said, she was like, her children were tapping out. Did not want to see a Zoom, nothing. And she went in the bathroom and was crying. And she said, I just can't take it no more. I can't take it. I have to stop this. And that day I had told her, I said, turn off your computer. Like, it's time to turn it off. And now to see her go from this parent who was crying in end of August to this mom who's sharing photos of her baby bringing learning to her on a Sunday. Like her child coming, sitting at a table with her or sitting on the couch saying, Mom, let's do these math problems. Or I bet you I can do more problems than you. Or this son who now is like the mad scientist in the kitchen, creating experiments and creating food experiments. But before the pandemic, her son was a child that she got a call about 10 times a week. Of he's not sitting still, he's not focusing, he's not, and this mom been tapped out before the pandemic, right? And now her seeing learning and the opportunity for learning everywhere and understanding how she engages her child with learning and how her child does the same, right? Our children are our most prized possession. And people need to understand, when we see our children thriving, we are happy as parents. That's all we want as a parent when we're in a school system. But they take it as when we raise a concern that it's a problem. No, I want my child to love learning. The same thing you claim you went to school for, right? But what we've been recognizing is, well, our children are our most prized possession. They're your hottest commodity.
Ooh.
And so what you want is a number in a seat as opposed to a person who's going to thrive and be successful. That is not fair to our children. They break children doing that.
This is what you just said. I'm going to stop on it, Bernita, because you just spit fire right there. When you say it's our prized possession, but it's you're seeing them as a commodity. Mm-hmm. When we talk about moving our kids or doing anything, the first thing people say is, what will happen to the system if everybody did that? What will happen to the system? So a ship is sinking and going underwater, and you're pulling your kid and putting them in a lifeboat, and people are saying, well, if everybody put their kid in a lifeboat, well, what happened to the Titanic?
Some of them will survive. What the heck do you mean?
Right.
We will survive and our seeds will continue. But that's the problem. Do you really want that to happen? Do you really want to survive?
And they're telling you what they care about, which is head count. They're not telling you that they care about your child surviving. Yeah. They're telling you that head count is well, how will I get a pension? Mm-hmm. If you pull your child out of the school system, that's going to take $16,000 out of the system. And that's $16,000 out of my pension. Kids better have my money. What is wrong with you? You can't do that.
you know? Say something. Oh my God. They don't have my money. I swear. That's the epitome of it all, right?
Isn't that what it feels like though?
You know, it's they don't want our kids in life rafts. They want our children to trail along this tattered, torn, broken up path that has failed our children. Before the pandemic, we had 16.9% of our kids reading on grade level in the city, Detroit. By third grade, that was a 2% hike in 2 whole years of this supposed attempt to help kids read, right? But yet they've taken arts, music, and things like that out of our schools. So they don't even allow learning to be fun for kids. Can you imagine a child seeing when they go to college, or an 18-year-old seeing when they go to college, that all of these kids who went to these schools cross the borders, like they're getting it, right? And I got this full ride scholarship, and I left out of my school with an A/B average, and I'm not getting crap. Wow. Like, how does that feel as an adult? And then you wonder why there's people who leave college with a bachelor's degree and come home and work at Applebee's. Bust their asses working for tips every day because they still only got a general degree when they left, because they were ill prepared. So they spent 4 years of education actually being educated basically almost a little bit on a high school level, because they took
remediated
courses. No.
How do you feel, Bernita, when people blame parents for the lack of outcomes and performance in schools? I've heard it from everybody, from teachers to school board members to the general public to journalists to people on Twitter. You know, if you were just better parents, your kids would be reading on grade level and the schools would be fine. I've heard people say, these are supposedly liberal people who have said, said things like, all the outcomes tell you is how educated the parents are. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty insulting, right? Like, I mean, how do you respond to people who blame us?
The same parents lived in those same neighborhoods and went to those same schools 20 years ago. So that's fact.
Right.
Showing them that not only did your schools fail our children, they failed us, right? They failed our grandparents. And so to constantly do the same thing over and over again, these parents see actually some of the same teachers, right, who are now the administrator at the school. And she was the old crabby, mean ass teacher who didn't like none of the black kids. And so she's sitting up here like, I'm going to walk in and I'm just going to trust that you're going to educate my child. And when you see me, you're like, Mrs. So-and-so. dude, back up off me. Let me go ahead and take my children off out of here. Right? Like, I'm constant. I'm gonna constantly keep doing that. The only reason why parents have had to do it as much is because parents have to work, and because of their low educational status, they don't have the better jobs where they can actually afford to take their kids out of communities. So now that they want to take them out of the schools, or they push back at you to say they want the schools better, you create us as the problem. No, your systems are the problem.
Well, and they want to, this is what's so cruel about it. They want to cut all avenues out to get out, cut them off. They want to cut off all roads out so that you're captive, but out of places where other people have already gotten out, including them. College educated people in any city. Detroit's not rare in this situation because you can go to any city. College educated people in any city have found the roads out for their children. When they buy their houses, when they decide what neighborhoods they're going to live in, one of the questions they ask is, tell me about the schools and let me look it up and blah, blah, blah. And it's just weird in every city that you don't find a whole bunch of college educated parents with their kids in the worst performing schools in their city or in their district, because they've made a choice and they had the price to pay. They could pay either through a mortgage or through some choice situation or whatever. So when somebody comes along to help the people who are left behind in redlined districts with lead in the water, with roaches and electricity that goes on and off and in and out because the grid is weakened.
40 kids in a classroom.
40 kids in the classroom.
25. Yeah.
Rats in some cases, no air conditioning in some cases, in many cases. When somebody comes and says to those parents, let's offer you some sort of program or outroad or whatnot, man, everybody's like, well, why would you do that? What are your motives? You must be political. You must be trying to destroy the system. To hell with the system. But Bernita, how do you respond to this? Like, the only reason that people would want to do this is because they want to destroy the unions, or they want to destroy the system, or they want to destroy the schools, or they hate public education or whatnot. So that's the only reason for anybody to come and bring a rescue plan and bring some damn safety boats.
I say that I hate any system that's not adequately preparing our children, whether it's public, charter, even if it's homeschooling. That's why we got homeschool coaches, right? Because I didn't want parents to be tapping out and they don't have the tools they need to make sure homeschooling is right. The problem is when we have those tools, people look at us as a threat because, now you're doing my job. It's like the receptionist who had a stank attitude all the time, and then a nice parent walk in and say, I'll help with the parents. Now this receptionist going to the union talking about she doing my job, and the principal letting her no. How about you do your job and then I don't have to do it, right? And parents are getting tired of it. The other thing I will say is that parents, these very same supposedly uneducated parents, have been wise and survivors through this. And so when we learn how to be empowered to use our own power, right, to actually navigate systems, that's when the threat comes. We get the tools to navigate our own systems and say that, this is Title I funding. So this is supposed to be used for us as parents? Then we're a threat, right? They buy out parents, all kind of stuff, right? And if they do the same thing in public school as they do when we take our kids out of public school and we find funding somewhere else to make it work.
They want to attack the people with the funds, but they don't want to attack the reason why you needed the funds in the first place.
Exactly.
I've said this, like the last time I was in Detroit, it was because the NAACP was doing a convention there. Not a convention. They were doing a town hall on charter schools. And as you know, I'm a charter person. Detroit got a whole different charter school situation. So I'm not even gonna front like y'all got a different charter school situation than what I have here. But I was there and I was listening, and what I heard in all of the talk was an attacking of the motives of the people who were trying to provide more options or opportunities out,
Mm-hmm.
but none of the same level of energy for attacking how the system got to be what it is. And I had somebody who was a Detroit native with me as one of the people was talking, who's now the president in NWSB, I'm just going to say.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about how these other schools like just get to pick their students and there's no such thing as school choice and blah, blah. And someone leaned over to me and said, you know, he went to Cass High School. And I was like, I didn't know what that meant. I was like, what's that mean? And he was like, they literally choose their students by test scores. And if you don't keep your grades up, they kick you out. And I was like, well, that's a public school? He's like, supposedly.
or we have public schools here that don't kick out, right? They silently push out. Or they boisterously push out by calling the mom 24 times a day, talking about John won't sit in a seat. And you know, John's just not doing well here. I mean, we've tried everything we can. They legally cannot tell you that your child needs to leave, but they will antagonize a mom or a dad so much to the point where this parent actually will get tired. The school will see that there are educators, and again, this is the same conversation we have about police, right? So all educators out there, don't get on me when I say something about educators, because you know your coworker friends who don't like the kids. You know they walk in the lunchroom every day and tell you the same thing about the kids that they've been telling you for the last 5 years. And you should have been told them to retire. But anyway, so we're going to get back on teachers. So these teachers will constantly write kids up every semester, and that principal will recognize, now look, every Black boy come through your classroom ain't a nuisance. So why you keep writing these same, but they don't say nothing because the teachers are in. And because I make it look like this teacher's doing bad, then I look bad as a leader of the school. You know, but again, the problem happened in my eyes, literally, really, when teachers moved out of their communities. You know, it used to be a time you went to church with the teacher, you saw the teacher at the grocery store, same thing with the fireman and the police officer. They had value in the communities in which they served, in which they worked in. And now a lot of those teachers don't have value there. I wish I knew the things I knew when I have a 29-year-old and I have a 17-year-old. I wish I knew these things when I had my 29-year-old. Because I remember in 6th grade, going up to his school, me just being a mom. I wasn't even an activist mom then. I'm just coming up to the school because I ain't seen you with homework in 3 days. Why you don't have homework? And you can't, the teacher didn't send you home with homework, right? And I go up to the school, I'm walking up the corridor, see that this side of the building is loud. I'm like, oh, that has to be a gym. I come in, I'm like, that's not a gym. Okay. Go to the office. They walking me towards this side of the school. I'm like, no, you're not. That can't be my son. No. As close as I get to the door, I'm hearing all this. Open up the door. My son and about 6 other little boys running around the class. And the teacher does this. Children, we have a guest. Hands up, hands up. My son looked at me and almost pissed on himself. Right? But I'm more mad.
That's right.
Because you standing here with about 10 kids sitting down like, kid, what do you mean? Why didn't I get a phone call? Is this what he does in your class every day? You know what that teacher told me? Oh, I thought this was typical 6th grade boy behavior. No, you thought this was typical Black boy behavior because you 24, ain't never taught in the city, and you let these kids run raggedy. They not coming home. I need my child out of her class. Because if she don't know, and a male, what was he, like dean of students or something, started going into class on a regular basis. I gave him a week. I said, let's see if this improves. Since you promising me you gonna make sure the class is online. But why do you as a man have to go in this classroom and make sure this teacher runs her class right? Ma'am, if you let these kids run your class, they're going to. So I'm gonna need you to quit. And I'm going to need you to go be the art teacher for a kindergarten class somewhere who wants to run around.
So there are so many levels to this story I want to unpeel. I want to say this first. Shanita Johnson says, hey now, Cass Technician here. Cass is a selective enrollment magnet school, another way system created to separate and tier students in Black communities specifically. And I can't make this one point. I'm just going to I want to come back to your story, but just want to say here, we have set up these, even in the best times that people remember the old school days, we had these tiers because we had them in New Orleans. We had a tier system of schools. And what I want to tell you right now is, this is going to sound bad, Bernita. You're going to have to help me clean up this comment I'm about to make, but this is going to sound bad. Sometimes when I meet the teachers or the most public school loving people in the whole world or whatnot, or the ones who think public school is so great and all that, blah, blah, they are so privileged in not understanding that that was because they went through the privileged part of the system, right? It's always these magnet school graduates. In New Orleans, we got the same ones. A lot of them came out of the parochial schools or whatnot. So they didn't experience some of the same schools that were left for the rest of us. Like the schools I went to were for the kids that didn't get into the A schools or the whatever schools. And that's why my attitude is just different once I became a parent. I'm like, yeah, I've seen the bottom of this thing, not the top of it. So if you're coming out the top, the selective part of it where you tested in and your grades were all good, and maybe you had two parents that were both teachers themselves, and they all like, you know, I can understand why you have this Disney-like understanding of this, and you don't have the urgency. You don't have the urgency of, we got to get out of here.
That's the Jack and Jills of public education. That's like, so at the end of the day, you are the ones who have arrived, and you feel like if everybody else pull their bootstraps up and get in line and do what they're supposed to do, it's almost like people saying, if you just put your hand on a 6 and or a 6, 3 and a 9, then police and look properly into the police officer's face, like he will not shoot you. He knew he was going to shoot a nigga that morning, right? Because that's what his motive was. And so the same thing with the people who preach that type of mentality to other Black people are a part of the problem. You are a part of the problem just as well. I went to Highland Park High School, and I'm gonna tell you, Highland Park is a little donut hole in the middle of Detroit, separate city. We could beat Cass academically on any given day. So when I moved to Detroit and put my children in Detroit schools, I was devastated because we had A1 education. We had teachers who loved us. Don't get me wrong, we had a couple of them who were something else too, but we had well-to-do teachers. Seeing the disparity in Detroit, I was done. Like, what do you mean you got these choice schools and then you got these schools who don't even have pencils and papers? What do you mean? Why aren't Black people fighting for all these schools to have this? Every school should be a choice school for a child. And that's the problem.
And it never was that way.
It
never was that way. And some of the students who came through the left behind schools, which is some of the ones that I attended and others, you form a different attitude by going to those schools. And now you become a parent and then a grandparent in the same community. You have 3-4 generations of a different attitude than the Cass students who actually came through a very Jack and Jill experience, or, they had. And my problem is that they're not empathetic enough to say, like, as smart as you are, you're not empathetic enough to go, yeah, but my situation was a little different. I understand why other people are trying to get out of those schools that my parents got me out of.
Instead, you badger parents for trying
to them
out of it, right? Now, mind you, think about that from a slave perspective. They always bring the house nigga in to make them feel like they were a little bit above the fit, right? Yep. And so doing that means that I create the ones with the whip who whip their own and who keep them in line and keep them in place. And anybody that steps outside of that boundary, you are considered a field nigga, right? And the house nigga can immediately become a field nigga if you keep on agreeing with the field niggas. And so a lot of those people don't want to lose that place of power. And I know there's people who get mad because they'll feel like that's a racist analogy or reverse racism or whatever you want to call it. But it's the same mentality in school systems. It's the same exact mentality.
You know what, though, and I'll say this, for my listeners or watchers or people watching this who will shrink at that suggestion. It is a racist analogy. It is racist. We didn't create the racism in it. We didn't create, but it's exactly a racist because it was a racist system that set up a division between people that were supposed to be in the bottom tier and the people that were supposed to reap the benefits of white supremacy partially by serving the masters. And when you look at public education, what we have already just talked about in this show today, there are people that are in left behind parts of the city, left behind parts of the school system, left behind parts of every system. And the middle class is trying desperately to not get there, not to have to drop into that. So they do adopt some of the manners and some of the ideology of the work or the ruling class rather than the working class. And I'll tell you how it plays out in a very specific way. Bernita, I saw you in an interview, you and Carrie. That was a friendly interview. I think it was Armapur. And it was a friendly enough interview. But when your interviewer got to the part about like who's funding you, and you know, some people would look at this and see this as an attempt to attack the teachers and Democrats and blah blah blah. And I thought to myself, did you miss the part once you got to that stupid middle class point? Did you miss the part leading up to that where they told you what was going on with their kids every day and how it was soul killing and how it was killing their futures, and that a parent's number one obligation is to defend their child's future? Like defend against all odds. Why would you ask such a dumb question except for the fact that you were on some middle class nonsense about Democrats and politics and everything else except for Bernita's child, Carrie's child in that situation? They have just told you what they're facing. What do you think it's going to take for us to wake up that part of our people, that part, the Jack and Jillish part of our people?
I think to some extent there'll be some that won't wake up, right? But there's a clause that people say, Harriet, don't argue with somebody Harriet would have left behind, right?
Yes.
So in that point, I make the conscious choice to say, okay, I'll let you fight the way you're gonna fight. I'm gonna fight the way. Like I'm good with it. You fight the way you're gonna fight. I'm gonna fight the way I'm gonna fight. I'm in this to make sure all our kids get it. I'm in this to make sure that brown and black kids do not constantly feel broken and be broken by a system that's flawed and everybody see it flawed. And then we come up with these analogies of reinvent education that we've been talking about for the last 5 years, and you still ain't reinvented nothing. You still fighting for funding, billions of dollars of funding being funneled into school systems. And you're saying the government said you have to talk to parents about it. But then you want to talk to parents and say, well, what type of bake sales would you like? Damn it, I don't want no bake sales. I want my child to go to college. I want my child to be successful from birth to career. But you do not want to listen to me because you don't think that I'm the best person to even hear from. You don't even honor my voice as a parent when I tell you I saw my child in 6th grade reading at an 8th grade level. And when he walked into your school, he now is in the 8th grade reading at a 6th grade level. Like, what's the disparity there, right? Did you lie at the first school, or is the test right now and you depleted his learning? Like, you took a zeal from him. What happened, right? But then you want to label him as the disciplinary issue. You want to throw all these little nuances out there to even make my child feel less of himself, or her feel less of herself, right?
That's part of the parent gaslighting too. I'm glad you are standing up in a way that gives other people an example of how you don't take any shorts with your children, because parents get gaslighted sometimes. Like, we think you're the experts on the other side sometimes, and we trust in that too much. So when you are telling us child's disruptive, hyperactive, if we only can medicate them, if we can only do this or whatnot, it's very easy and seductive to believe that because you're the expert. You've been through this a million times. So for the parent who eventually wakes up and says, wait a second now, there is a disconnect between the child that I know at home and the child you're talking about at school. And I'm not going to give in to just saying your version is right. What I'm going to have to say is there's a disconnect between the versions of the child, because my child is smart and funny and creative and happy and gregarious and tears things apart and puts them back together again, and can do all these amazing things that I see. But then when I talk to you, somehow your version of it is not jiving with me. But we don't have a lot of models of parents who feel confident enough to not go with the school's version.
Well, what it is, I think a lot of times parents are forced to go with the school version because they have to send their kids to school to work. And they're looking at it like, baby, just look, I just need you to go into this building. Stacy said it, one of our parents, she said it. Her Sunday morning used to be filled with, or Sunday evening used to be filled with doing her kids' hair, prepping their clothes for school, and telling them, look, this week, just go in the building. And I need y'all just come on, just like basically just comply. Just comply.
Right.
And the little boy is sitting there on Sunday like, okay, Mom, I'm going to do this for you. But kids know when somebody don't like them. When I walk in the classroom,
yes, they do.
You eye me to the side and you say, good morning, John. Good morning, Jeff. Good morning. Okay, now, John, when you come in, I need you to sit down. Like, you just change your whole tone and everything on me. And I'm just supposed to be happy-go-lucky in your class. You don't even like me. You don't even like me. You don't really like my peers. You single us out for no apparent reason. And I'm supposed to give my best to you. I'm supposed to do my best in your classroom. It's non-existent for kids because kids are more genuine than adults. If we allow kids to cuss every day, kids would cuss a teacher out on a regular basis.
And they should.
Because, right.
In some cases, I just want to be very real with everybody listening what my position on problem children is. You see it on my hat. And it's because I always am like coming back to this point of in a jacked up system, you should be raising problem children who give the system a problem, because it's a sign of good health. If your system is jacked up, like the slaves that revolted, the people that who won't comply, the people who put a monkey wrench in the system, those are the people that have good health because they recognize that the system is wrong. And your kids are recognizing in kindergarten sometimes that these systems are unfair or not set up for them. And that's why when many of them act out at school, but then you take them out of school A and move their surroundings or change them, they become a different child. They don't really become a different child. They're in a different system.
Yeah.
Right. They're in a different context. So problem children is what we should be raising if the system's going to be this jacked up for this long. I want people to know that, understand that.
Well, I got one. That Victoria Bradley. I swear, when I would tell teachers, don't let her run your class. Don't let her run your class. And this is the other thing I would tell teachers. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to get on mine if she wrong. But if you wrong, I'm going to get on you too. So I'm going to need you to make sure you clean your stuff up, right? And when my daughter would come home and tell me something about a teacher, it's like the truth. There's your side, Victoria. There's the teacher side, and there's the truth. Let's get to it, right? Let's get to it. And I had quite a few teachers who literally honored that, right? Like we could do. But if you was a parent who was pushing back on something they told you that your child did, then how dare you come in here and just not believe what I said? Ma'am, I am not going to just believe you when my child came home looking like she was scared half to death. I'm not just going to believe you. No. And you as a parent should never just believe the teacher. You should never just believe the teacher. I will go to school with a camera on them. Like police wear cameras. Like kids need to be able to wear it on their chest all day, every day.
Listen, just now that they have phones with them, life has changed a little bit. We're seeing some things we never saw before, right? I mean, I can do a whole show on the last year and a half's worth of kid captured videos of teachers freaking out or doing crazy things or saying stuff to kids they shouldn't say. You know, the teacher at Ben Franklin in New Orleans having an argument with the black student, white teacher having an argument about the use of the word nigger and basically saying anybody can say it, it's just a word or whatnot in the classroom. Now, I wouldn't know about that.
If I said what? Like you antagonizing that little boy. But he held his own though, didn't he?
You saw the video, right?
Yes, he did. He held his
Yes.
own, like he did not hit her. And when she
Right.
pushed up on him, she wanted him. Like, you're antagonist. You be in a classroom, Karen, for real. Like, leave the
Well,
babies alone.
and without cameras, we would never know about it.
Never.
You know why? Because a lot of times we would get told a different story and we would tend to believe the school.
Yeah.
Now, as we come to the end of the show, I want to say, I want to ask about how sustainable do you think the movement for helping parents graduate and liberate their children from systems that don't work? And by this, I mean, you discussed in this hour how you at the classroom level saw a teacher where you were like, oh, hell no. And then you can escalate that up to a school level and deal with the principal where you're like, oh, you don't get it either. And you can lift it up to a superintendent level and be like, oh, well, damn, I see that the fish rots at the head. I can see why this isn't working or whatnot. And the teachers on our side. So the full liberation plan in some cases is, now we got to get you all the way out of here. Like you just like, it's not the classroom. It's not the school. It's not the district. It's like the whole thing right now. They got us messed up. How sustainable do you think the movement is to get more parents to have that realization and to act on it?
I think it's very sustainable. I think more organizations like VELA and more organizations like some of our local philanthropy organizations are figuring out how to get money into grassroots parents, right, into the hands of parents, with more organizations that have that capacity to give those dollars to families they need to, right? While I'm like, I would love all the money. I want everybody to have an engaged Detroit in it, like every single city, because what's going to happen is the more seats that are taken out of those schools, mind you, kids are already tapping out. Detroit Public Schools truancy rate was 68%. That was not due to homeschooling. That was due to something you are doing wrong. That's not just due to parents who just don't want their kids to show up. I don't think there's very many parents at all who just don't want their kids to get educated. So quit framing us as parents who just didn't log on. And so with that, it's already happening. And the schools, I feel, are smudging numbers by calling it truancy when there's actual kids who are homeschooling. Of course, if I call it truancy, I still get to collect federal funding, right? When your child is twice a month, when I convince them to get online. But that parent is literally pursuing homeschooling because they're seeing that the system is even more flawed than they imagine. And so it's sustainable. The other way that funding needs to happen is if parents want to naturally homeschool, there's a district here called Niles Community School District where they partner with their public schools. Whether they'll partner with city schools, that's the problem. They partner with most of the white constituent homeschools, and the per pupil allocation for the extra curriculum classes actually goes to the homeschool network. And so they're funding homeschool through the public schools. And the public school has even realized how many students they were able to keep because you kept core pupil dollars without kids sitting in seats and parents were doing your job at home.
So we are developing the infrastructure over time. It's not going to happen overnight, but we are starting the seeds. Some of it is regenerative in that, like the work that you do, it's not just all relying on the little grant, but it's also teaching people to fish and providing them coaching assistance and fellowship. I think, honestly, to be very honest with you, the most important thing is fellowship, the knowing that you have a network of people you can tap into when times get tough, because the money comes and goes, ebbs and flows. But the support that you need to successfully create co-ops is the thing you need most, I think, this is just me talking, is organization. Like you need the ability to know how to run a co-op, like, and you can make it happen. So once again,
show people. So
go ahead. I'm sorry, what you say?
I'm willing to show people. So if people want to know how to run a co-op, let me know. I'll show you. I ain't gonna even hold you up. I don't even have to charge you. Do what you need to do for your kids to get it.
Absolutely. So this is what I want. I want people to reach out to you. So people listening and watching, this has been an hour with Bernita Bradley, who is a regional delegate for the National Parents Union, but is also in her own right a long-term parent activist, has also done homeschooling as a home educator, has worked locally at within Detroit on real grassroots efforts to get more parents involved in advocacy for their children. How can they reach you, Bernita? How can people reach you and find you? Which hat do you want them to find you under?
They can find me under Bernita, Bernita at npunion.org, Bernita at npunion.org, or the girl in the alley at gmail.com. That's my alias name.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you for coming on today. You keep it real. You keep it all the way real. And I appreciate that so much, because honestly, there's a fog machine on right now that's attempting to gaslight us as parents. And it's nice to see someone like you who cuts through the fog. No. Just like cut through it. Don't let these people lie about your babies. Don't let them lie about the safety boats. This is the part that I don't understand. Everybody else, parents, if you don't hear anything else, if you came out of the Left Behind schools, if this is a experience that you have in common with me, what I want to say to you is don't let anybody shame you for a lifeboat, because they already got their kids in safe harbor, and now they're criticizing you for how you're going to get your kids to safe harbor. They're going to come at you if you are attempting to reduce their head count by removing one head, which happens to be yours, your child's head count. Realize that they don't see your child as human. They see your child as a per pupil revenue. And that per pupil revenue will get them to act gangster. They will act gangster. They will threaten. In Los Angeles, there have been cases of school districts threatening to put parents up for deportation. Latino family. Can you imagine a school district threatening parents with deportation if they don't act the right way or think the right way about these things?
Here they threaten them with truancy. If your child's truant, you can't get state funding, right? You can't get food assistance.
I mean, how crazy is this? It's all on head count. So realize that it's going to get real gangster real quick if you are trying to remove your child. But you got to do what you got to do. Make a decision. Is this your child, or are you worried about a system and a country and a nation that has never worried about you? Right? Like, you got to make that decision right now, because God help you, because God put one person in your child's life as the ultimate ruthless fighter for their defense. That's you.
Yeah.
That's what God gave your child. God gave your child, like, listen, so you can, you could wait till you die and be like, God, it was real tough. And God would be like, well, which part of you being the sole guardian of that child didn't you get? Right? Which part of that? Because I think I made it pretty clear that parents have children.
If that child does something, the court gonna come after you, not the teacher.
That's right. That's right. So get in touch with Bernita, find your power, organize your power, and then get friends, because you can't do it all alone. Get other people to join together, create a cooperative. Bernita, once again, thank you so much. I really